Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Gamescript. Tonight, we're going to be taking a look at the Detroit Lions versus the Green Bay Packers in Green Bay. And so far this season, there's been a lot to like about Jordan Love. He is the fourth overall fantasy scorer in points per game so far this season. He's a top 10 in quarterback rushing yards, and he's third overall with 7 passing touchdowns. So that ties him up with Patrick Mahomes as far as passing touchdowns. So you've been pretty happy if you've drafted him in best ball this season. But did you also know that he's 37th in overall completion percentage at about 53%? And he is below guys like Kenny Pickett, Deshaun Watson, and Jimmy G in total passing yards. And now he faces a Detroit defense without David Bakhtiari yet to protect him. And Hutchinson should probably eat tonight. And we'll get into that after this quick break. What's up, guys? I'm Simon Edwards at Pumacom with Heat Seeker Sports, and you're watching Gamescript. And we're going to break down this Detroit versus Green Bay game. But first, do me a favor and give us a like on this video and subscribe to our YouTube page. I'm going to set the bar pretty low. If we can get 10 likes, I'm going to hit a short video later on today with my favorite plays in this showdown contest. We're going to analyze DraftKings Showdown for this game. And we're going to pick a direction that might be lesser owned than the field and try to nail a game script that will help us win tonight like we did on Monday. On Monday, I came in third place in a showdown contest in the Cincinnati game and came very close to getting a win. But Matt Stafford threw a touchdown to the wrong guy at the end. And Stafford ended up not in my lineup, but he was in the winning lineup and ended up beating me by a little over 1 point. So came very close there, but we keep trying. And hopefully this is the game where luck will change. Let's get into the analysis here. I'm going to take a look at the overall slate. We got AMON-RA St. Brown is a guy that a lot of people are going to be plugging in tonight. AMON-RA has not had a ton of success against Green Bay. He's had one big game against them in the past couple years, but last year Green Bay was pretty much able to shut him down. So I'm not going to fade AMON-RA St. Brown, but I'll probably have a lesser exposure than I normally would. Aaron Jones looks like he's going to be back in today. He had a big game a couple weeks ago before he got hurt, and he scored 26.5 points in week 1 against Chicago. And now he faces Detroit. Detroit's got a good run D, though. So Aaron Jones might be a popular option tonight, and I probably won't have a lot of exposure to him either. If we look down further, we see Jared Goff. Jared Goff has struggled on the road, and he hasn't had a lot of big games against Green Bay in general. Goff just has struggled against Green Bay, except for like one game in 2018 when he was with the Rams. He had a big game, but other than that, he's barely cracked about 17 fantasy points in his 4 games with Green Bay as he's played with the Lions. We got Jordan Love. Laid out the case for him in the beginning. He's been very good this year, but I think this is the week where we see Jordan Love's carriage turn into a pumpkin. I think the Detroit defense will be able to expose him tonight, and I think that Jordan Love is going to maybe have some success on the ground when he's scrambling because Detroit adapts their defense to their opponent. So I feel like they're going to blitz him a lot, and Jordan Love does not do well versus the blitz, and he does not do that well versus pressure. So I think that Detroit is going to put a lot of pressure on him. It's going to set him up so that he's not able to pass as well as he has been so far this season, especially with his inefficiency. And I think Detroit overall is going to take advantage of that. So we look down a little bit more. Jahmyr Gibbs. I like Jahmyr Gibbs matchup. Green Bay's allowing a lot of passes to running backs. And as we saw a couple games ago, he had 9 targets against Seattle. And I think that sets him up pretty well in this matchup against Green Bay, who's giving a lot of targets to running back. Versus Seattle, Montgomery was still in that game. I think he got hurt midway through that game or at some point in that game. But David Montgomery is looking like he's back tonight. I haven't seen official word on that yet, but it's looking like he will be back tonight. So David Montgomery will be there to take a lot of the load off of Jahmyr Gibbs tonight. We also got Romeo Doubs. Doubs is having a pretty good season. He scored 18 fantasy points last week against New Orleans. He scored 18.5 against Chicago. Problem with Romeo Doubs is Christian Watson looks like he'll be back tonight as well. So he'll be back and taking up some of those targets away from Romeo Doubs, who won't enjoy, the huge target share that he's had. Speaking of Christian Watson, here he is. He hasn't done anything this year, but Christian Watson has last stretch that we saw him on, he was exploding, and now he gets his first game of the season against Detroit. So we'll see how he does there. Sam Laporta has a good matchup against Green Bay. Sam Laporta had his breakout game last week, scoring 22 points against Atlanta. He's been getting a lot of targets. He had 11 targets last week, 6 targets the week before, and 5 before that. So we got a good matchup here for Laporta. A.J. Dillon has done nothing this season. I'm not interested in him, especially against this rush defense. David Montgomery is an interesting guy tonight because Green Bay is susceptible to the run, and we don't know how much work he's going to get now that Jahmyr Gibbs has been integrated more into the offense since Montgomery has been hurt. But David Montgomery is interesting tonight. Musgrave, he's also got a good matchup against Detroit. Musgrave has had decent performance so far this season. He had 8 targets last week. Didn't do much with it. He only got 49 yards, and he hasn't had a touchdown yet. But he's been getting some targets. He had 8, 3, and 4 are his targets so far this season. And last week, it looked like they started to utilize him a little bit more in the passing game with those 8 targets. So he's interesting. Josh Reynolds. Josh Reynolds does not get targeted against the type of defense that Green Bay runs. It's more of a Khalif Raymond is the guy who gets targeted against this type of defense. But Josh Reynolds has had a decent season so far. He didn't get any work last week, but the prior week he had 6 targets for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns, ended up getting 23 fantasy points. The week before that, he had 7 targets for 12 fantasy points. So Josh Reynolds, I'm probably not going to have a lot of exposure to him tonight. So that's the main group there. Jaden Reed is interesting because Detroit is susceptible to the slot, and that is where Jaden Reed primarily runs his routes. And if you look at his game log, he's had 7 targets last week, 8 targets the prior week, and then 5 targets in week 1. So Jaden Reed is getting a lot of work, and he's cheap at not 8,400. What's his flex salary at? Jaden Reed is cheap at 5,600 relative to the amount of work he's getting. He hasn't had a huge, he had a 19.7 point game in week 2. But other than that, he's been under 10 fantasy points, even with that workload. So he's a guy that I'm interested in, especially with the pressure that's going to be put on Jordan Love tonight by Detroit's defense, and it could make for an interesting matchup with need to dump off to guys like Raymond and Musgrave tonight. So other than that, the kickers, as always, interested in the kickers. I think this is going to be a low-scoring game. I think the defenses both are going to have good matchups in this game. I think that both these quarterbacks, with Jared Goff's history of playing on the road, but also playing against Green Bay, he has not done well. So I don't think that he's going to have a huge game tonight, and I don't think that Love is going to have a huge game against this defense tonight. I think Love gets exposed a little bit. So that leaves things open for low scoring, and that type of environment is could be good for the kickers, because maybe the offense is able to move the ball, but they're not able to score, and the kickers have to come in and mop things up. So I like the kickers tonight. I also like both these defenses tonight, but I have a lean towards the Giants defense as far as my preference. I like how the Lions adapt to their opponents, and I think that they have advantage against Jordan Love with missing Bakhtiari and just being inefficient in general. And I think that's going to get exposed at some point. And I think tonight is the night on prime time. Other than that, not seeing too much as far as guys I like. I'm looking in the cheap range. I do not see anyone too interesting. The only guy that I think you can get salary relief, realistic salary relief in this range is Torrey. He has 3 targets, 2 targets, 3 targets, hasn't done much with it, but he's the type of guy where if they get desperate and they start launching the ball, Torrey has shown that he can catch the ball in that situation. Marvin Jones Jr., really not interested there. He's been pretty bad this year. So I think Khalif Raymond would get more work than Marvin Jones Jr. And Khalif Raymond is the type of guy that they like to target against Green Bay's style of defense. And Khalif Raymond and Amon-Ra St. Brown back in 2021 had a big game versus Green Bay. That's the best game that Green Bay has played against. Detroit has played against Green Bay recently, was in that 2021 game. So that game, they ended up winning 37-30. That was the second game of 2021. And in that game, Khalif Raymond ended up getting 4 receptions for 101 yards and 1 touchdown. And Amon-Ra had 8 receptions for 109 yards and a touchdown. And where was that game played? That game was played in Detroit. So it was inside, so it wasn't at Green Bay. So that, makes sense there with what we're talking about with Jared Goff on the road versus at home. So that's our setup. Those are plays that we have potential interest in for this build. Even though I do not like Jordan Love's chances in this game, I still think his rushing upside is going to be valuable tonight. And I think that he still has the potential to put up points. We like these guys who just chuck it, who chuck it no matter what, even if they're inefficient, they're just throwing it. So Jordan Love with the rushing upside and the potential to pass it, I'm going to put him in the captain in this lineup. I think in order to differentiate the lineup, I'm only going to stack him with 1 pass catcher in this. And I'm going to stack him with Christian Watson, because I'm going to go under the assumption that, maybe Christian Watson is coming back healthier than maybe people think, coming off of missing 3 games. He's had a hamstring injury. We don't like the soft tissue injuries, but let's plug him in. His last game against Detroit, just to take a look at him, Christian Watson had 6 targets, 5 receptions for 104 yards. So he did well versus the Lions when Aaron Rodgers was throwing to him. The prior game to that, I don't think he played that game, but let's check out the thing here. Christian Watson had 2 receptions for 24 yards. So I think that was before he started breaking out. So he's had one big game against the Lions already. So why not have a second one? So let's plug him in the lineup here. If you don't like Watson, you could always plug in Romeo Doubs, who's also been playing well this year and who also kind of fits that mold. So in this game script, Jordan Love's going to be passing to Christian Watson, throwing bombs to Christian Watson. Hopefully we see a decent game out of Watson, but Jordan Love's also going to be scrambling a lot. He's going to be running the ball. I think that with the way Detroit's defense is, we don't want to put any of Green Bay's running backs with them necessarily. So let's stick with Detroit for the rest of this build. I think we can also get a little different. This kind of gives me the vibes of the game that we had a couple years ago where Taysom Hill faced off against the Dallas Cowboys, and he had an inefficient quarterback with rushing ability playing against a really good defense. So we played Taysom with one of his field stretchers in the dude that's playing with Deontay Harris, the guy with the Jets now. He's changed his name to Deontay Hardy, but he was the guy that we paired with Taysom in that matchup. We're going to pair Christian Watson with Jordan Love in this matchup, and we're going to add in the Lions defense, hoping that the Lions defense can have a good game against Jordan Love. So now that we've got those guys in, I'm going to skip Amon-Ra St. Brown in this build, and I'm going to go right to Jahmyr Gibbs. Even though Montgomery looks like he'll be back tonight, I like Gibbs with his potential to catch the ball against this defense, with Green Bay letting up so many receptions to running back this year. So Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm going to plug him in with the Lions D, and going to plug in, who else are we going to plug in? Sam Laporta. We've seen his matchup. He's got a decent matchup. They've been using him a lot, and I think I like Sam Laporta in this matchup. Let me check out some other stats here with Sam Laporta. The Packers are giving up 19 points a game to tight end position, so that makes me like Laporta even more. So I'm going to plug in Laporta in this lineup. That leaves us with 5,500 left. A lot of ways you can go in this direction. You got Khalif Raymond, who we talked about before, has a decent, performance against Green Bay already, and he's the type of receiver they like to target in this matchup. We got the kickers, Patterson and Carlson. I don't mind either of those guys if you want to throw them in. You could go double defense with the Packers D. I don't necessarily want to do that myself, but it's an option. And then you got these cheap guys that we talked about. So there's a direction for this lineup. I think the 4-2 builds, Detroit to Green Bay, are going to be popular. I'm not sure what the popularity. Let's check the popularity of Jordan Love and the captain. Jordan Love and the captain is looking at around 13% ownership. I think we've differentiated enough, stacking him with one receiver and then adding in the opposing defense to differentiate our lineups a good amount there. So I'm not too worried about that ownership percentage. Other captain ownerships that I would be interested in a build like this, if we wanted to swap around Christian Watson for Jordan Love, maybe Christian Watson's the guy that gets more points in this in that pairing. Don't have a problem with that either. So he's a lot less owned. He's significantly less owned. So that's a different direction you could go. If you wanted to do a build where it's more Green Bay heavy in this matchup, that would be an interesting one. If we wanted to go, maybe say Jordan Love as the captain, and then we stacked him with Christian Watson and maybe Luke Musgrave, because Musgrave has a good matchup in this one too. On the other side, we want to have at least Jahmyr Gibbs or Amon-Ra St. Brown or Laporta. I feel like you want to have one of those guys. I'm going to put in Gibbs just knowing that matchup. And I'm going to put in, let's see, who else can we put in this lineup? If we want to get another Packer in this lineup, I'm thinking maybe the kicker would be the way to go. That would keep Aaron Jones at bay from having a big game and appearing in our in the winning optimal lineup. That leaves us with options like Josh Reynolds. Oh, you know what? Jalen Reed. I'm going to take him out. I'm going to put in Jalen Reed in this build. That would give Jordan Love 3 guys to target. One of them, the deep bombs. You got Luke Musgrave, catching the short passes. You got Jalen Reed in the slot eating against this defense. And that leaves us with 5,500 left. We already have Jahmyr Gibbs in there. We could put in a guy like Khalif Raymond, who I mentioned has already had decent games against Green Bay in the past. You could also go with one of the kickers in a build like this. Maybe Jahmyr Gibbs is having a big game, and then in this case, Patterson is coming in and taking up the points for the Lions. So I don't know if that necessarily fits. Well, maybe it does. Maybe the Lions are able to move the ball. Gibbs is getting all the touchdowns. Patterson's getting field goals. Love is having to pass to guys in catch-up mode, so he's hitting Watson with a couple deep bombs, and then maybe he's hitting Musgrave and Jaden Reed for the PPR points. So there's a build there, a direction. I shouldn't have put that last guy in there, but that gives you an idea of a build to go 4-2 on the Green Bay side. So keep looking at the news. Keep an eye on who's going to be healthy and who's going to be out tonight, because that's going to be important to some of these plays. I think that Montgomery is looking like he's in. Montgomery's looking like he's in, and then Christian Watson is looking like he's in as well. As far as other injuries, the Detroit offensive line is banged up. Vaitai is out, so that's another strike against Jared Goff right there. Taylor Decker is questionable. Jonah Jackson also questionable. David Montgomery questionable. It is looking likely to play. For Green Bay, Bakhtiari and Jenkins are out. Jair Alexander is questionable, so that's a one to keep an eye out for with Green Bay if you want to start some of those Lions receivers. Keep an eye on that one. Aaron Jones is questionable, and Christian Watson is questionable. It looks like both those guys are going to play, but as always, keep an eye on the injury news throughout the day. As again, give us a like on this video. Give a subscribe to this channel. We like to get that. We want to get the subscriber count up on YouTube. Helps us out. Helps out getting more attention to the site, more attention to these videos, and give us a like on the video. And I should have a short one coming out later today. Looking for 10 likes on this video to get that short out there. And otherwise, I will see you later this afternoon. Thank you.